Small town Texas horror story. Texas has towns so small you can drive through them in less than 3 minutes, blink once, and you'll miss the whole damn thing. One of those towns, call it Red Harvest, though that wasn't its real name, sat out on a stretch of highway between Lubbock and Amarillo, surrounded by nothing but dry wheat fields, crooked fence posts, and the long, flat horizon that seemed to go on forever. If you've never been to a place like that, let me tell you, there's a particular kind of silence that presses down on you there. It isn't the kind of silence you find in libraries or empty rooms, but a living silence, like the earth itself is holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Folks in Red Harvest had grown up with that silence, and maybe that's why they didn't notice when it started to change, when it started to feel heavier, thicker, like smoke in the lungs. Outsiders felt it. The people driving through would mutter about bad vibes or strange energy. Truckers, the lifeblood of those highways, started refusing to stop at the old diner, even for a cup of black coffee, and they'd tell each other stories on CB radios about headlights disappearing, about shapes standing out in the fields at night. They weren't wrong. Something was out there in Red Harvest, something old and mean, and by the summer of 1987, the town's name would become a whispered curse, a story mothers told their kids when they wanted them to behave. It began as most bad things do, small. A missing dog here, a vandalized truck there. Nobody cared much at first, just blamed kids or coyotes or both. But then old Mr. Jennings vanished. He was the kind of man who never left his porch without a chaw of tobacco and his Remington rifle leaning close by. One morning his rocking chair was found rocking slowly back and forth, tobacco spit dried into a dark stain on the porch floorboards. The rifle was still there, leaning against the rail. But Jennings himself? Gone like he'd been scooped clean out of the world. No tracks, no signs of struggle, nothing but the faintest whiff of something foul in the air, like meat left too long in the sun. Sheriff Boyd, who had more belly than brains, shrugged it off and wrote the report as possible runaway. A 72-year-old man, a runaway. Folks laughed at that at first, but the laughter died fast when Jennings wasn't the only one. Within 2 weeks, 3 more townsfolk were missing. A waitress, a farmhand, a young mother who left her baby screaming in its crib. The strangest thing was, the fields began to look different. People swore the wheat bent the wrong way in the wind, like it was being pushed by hands that weren't there. Others said they saw movement out there at night, shapes taller than a man, too wide for a scarecrow. Teenagers dared each other to go out past the fence lines, but they never lasted long. They'd come back pale, sick, sometimes crying without knowing why. One boy, Jimmy Lawson, went missing after one of those dares. They found his bike in a ditch and nothing else. His mama sat in the church for 3 days straight, praying until her voice was gone. She swore she could hear him crying in the wind outside. But the grown-ups stopped talking about it. That's the way of small towns. Trouble comes and instead of facing it, folks put their heads down and pretend it ain't there. Red Harvest was good at pretending. Maybe too good. Because by the time the real horror came crawling out of those fields, it was too late for prayers, too late for pretending, and far too late to run. Sheriff Boyd might have been slow, but even he couldn't ignore the whispers forever. Folks cornered him at the gas station, at church, even in the grocery aisle, hissing questions like, "What are you gonna do about Jennings?" Or, "You find Jimmy's body yet?" The man would puff up his chest, rub the sweat off his bald head with a handkerchief, and mutter something about keeping an eye on things. Truth was, he was scared stiff. Boyd lived in Red Harvest his whole life. He knew the land, knew the people, but he didn't know what to make of fields that seemed to breathe after dark, or the way porch lights flickered like dying stars whenever that low hum started rolling through town around midnight. Yeah, that hum. Nobody could place it, not even the mechanics or the farmers. It wasn't a generator, wasn't the wind. It was deeper than that, almost too low to hear, like the earth's heartbeat echoing under the dirt. The first time you noticed it, it made your teeth ache. Stay outside long enough while it droned on, and you'd swear your bones wanted to crawl out of your skin. People pretended they couldn't hear it, but everybody did. Even the kids stopped playing outside after dark. They said the sound came from the fields, from whatever was out there. By August, Red Harvest was drying up. The diner closed, the gas station cut its hours. Even the church saw fewer and fewer souls in the pews on Sunday mornings. Pastor Miller tried to give a sermon about Job, about faith in suffering, but his hands shook so bad on the pulpit the Bible slipped and crashed onto the floor. Folks took that as a sign. They whispered about the harvest coming early this year, though no one said what they meant by that. Crops were wilting. Cows gave birth to stillborn calves with eyes clouded white. The air was always heavy with that stink, half-spoiled meat, half-burning rubber. Families started leaving. Not packing up neat, not saying goodbyes, just gone overnight, houses left unlocked, food rotting on kitchen counters. Boyd tried to cover it up, said people were relocating. But deep down he knew. Everyone who left Red Harvest didn't make it far. The McCarthy family was proof of that. They piled into their rusted Chevy Suburban one evening after supper, Ma, Pa, 3 kids under 10, and drove off toward Amarillo. Next morning, Boyd got a call from the state troopers, found the Suburban on the side of Highway 87, doors open, headlights still on, engine running. Inside was nothing. Not a wallet, not a shoe, not even the baby's car seat. Just empty, like the family had been scooped out of their lives the same way Jennings had been scooped out of his chair. Troopers scratched their heads, said maybe bandits. But bandits don't take everything. They don't take people. That's when the fear turned real. You could feel it in the way the town walked, fast, heads down, like they didn't want the sky noticing them. Folks nailed crosses to their doors, hung garlic, painted weird chalk symbols on their porches. The Lawson woman, the one who lost her boy, she walked straight into Boyd's office one morning with her eyes swollen red from crying and hissed at him, "It's the fields. It's in the fields. You know it. You've always known it." Then she collapsed right there on the linoleum floor, clutching her chest, whispering Jimmy's name like a prayer. Boyd didn't tell anybody, but when he hauled her home, he glanced out at those wheat stalks bowing in the breeze and, just for a second, he thought he saw a figure standing between them. Too tall. Too still. Watching. That night, Boyd sat on his porch with a shotgun across his lap. The hum started around 12:15. The crickets went dead silent. The stars looked strange, like they were flickering too fast, and the wheat swayed even though there wasn't any wind. And then, right when his eyelids started to droop, he saw them. Shapes, sliding out from the rows of wheat. Not men. Not animals. Things. Their bodies shimmered like heat haze, stretching and twisting, and where their faces should have been, there was nothing but a hole, black and bottomless. Boyd froze, couldn't even breathe. One of them tilted its head, like it was sniffing him from across the yard. He gripped the shotgun so hard his knuckles went white. But just as suddenly as they appeared, the shapes slid back into the wheat, gone like smoke in a breeze. Boyd sat there till dawn, shaking, the shotgun useless in his lap. And for the first time in his life, Sheriff Boyd admitted to himself that Red Harvest was already lost. When Sheriff Boyd finally told someone what he'd seen, it wasn't his deputy or the mayor, it was old Doc Harper. Harper had been the town's doctor for 40 years, a wiry man with liver spots on his hands and a cigarette always dangling from his lips. He'd delivered half the babies in Red Harvest, stitched up half the drunks, and buried half the rest. People trusted him, maybe more than they trusted God. Boyd went to his office one morning just after sunrise, eyes bloodshot, reeking of sweat and whiskey. Harper sat him down, listened to his rambling about the figures in the fields, and didn't laugh. Didn't even smirk. Just leaned back in his chair, took a drag and said, "So, you've seen him too." That stopped Boyd cold. Harper explained in that gravelly voice of his that Red Harvest had been wrong for a long time. Before the town was even founded, before the highway, before the wheat. Back when it was just Comanche land, the tribes wouldn't settle there. They skirted wide around it, called it cursed ground. Harper said his grandfather had told him stories, about shadows that walked upright, about voices in the corn, about hunters who never came back. The settlers ignored the warnings, of course. They always do. Built the town right on top of it, plowed the fields, planted crops, and thought they'd tame the land. But you can't tame something that isn't alive the way we understand it. Harper leaned close, his breath stinking of nicotine, and told Boyd, "That ground out there? It eats. It always has. And it's hungry again." Boyd wanted to laugh it off, call it old man superstition, but deep down he knew Harper was telling the truth. The disappearances, the hum, the figures, it all fit, though God help him, he wished it didn't. He asked Harper what they should do. Harper gave the kind of bitter laugh only old men know and said, "There ain't no doing. Not unless you want to burn the whole damn town to the ground. Only thing you can do is get out before it notices you." The word notices stuck in Boyd's head like a splinter. Because that was what it felt like, wasn't it? That sense of being watched, of being sized up. Like the town itself was a spider, and they were flies caught in its web. But Boyd couldn't just leave. He had a wife buried in the cemetery out back of the church, and a daughter who lived 2 houses down with her husband and kids. Red harvest was in his blood. And besides, where would they go? What if whatever was in the fields followed? Still, Harper's words chewed at him. He spent the next few nights patrolling, shotgun in hand, circling the outskirts of town like a man guarding against an army he couldn't even see. Sometimes, he swore he heard whispers drifting out of the wheat, voices calling his name in tones that were almost familiar. His late wife, his mama, his best friend from high school who died in Vietnam. He never answered, never went closer, but it was getting harder not to. The voices sounded so warm, so trusting. Like all he had to do was step off the gravel and into the rows, and he'd never be lonely again. Meanwhile, the town was unraveling faster. Families who stayed locked their doors at sundown, pulled curtains tight, and prayed through the night. Kids stopped going to school. The diner, when it tried reopening, found plates of food left untouched because customers swore they saw something move in the reflection of the glass. The crops themselves looked sick, wheat stalks turning black at the tips, bending toward the earth as though weighed down by invisible hands. And the hum grew louder. Not every night anymore, but every day, low and steady, so that the walls in people's houses seemed to vibrate and glasses rattled on kitchen shelves. The whole town was trembling. Then came the night of the fire. It started at the Lawson place, nobody knows how. Some said Mrs. Lawson lit a candle for Jimmy and let it fall. Others swore they saw a streak of light descend into the roof from the sky. Whatever the case, the house went up like kindling. Boyd and a few neighbors rushed out with buckets and hoses, but the flames weren't normal. They were too bright, almost blue, and they didn't spread the way fire should. Instead, they burned straight down, collapsing the house into itself as though the ground had opened up and swallowed it whole. When it was over, nothing was left but a hole in the dirt, wide as a swimming pool, deep as a grave. The fire department from Amarillo came the next morning, scratched their heads, and filed it under unexplained structural failure. But the townsfolk knew better. Red Harvest was eating again. After the fire, Red Harvest turned into a place of whispers. Nobody walked alone anymore, not even in daylight. Men carried rifles to the grocery store, women clutched rosaries like lifelines, and the kids, well, the kids just stared. That was maybe the worst part. You'd pass a child on the street, skinny, pale, barefoot, and they'd just stand there, eyes fixed on the fields, like they were waiting for something to come walking out. Sometimes their lips would move, like they were mumbling to themselves, but if you got close enough, you'd hear them saying things that made no sense. Old words, broken words, syllables that curled wrong in the ear. Pastor Miller tried to bless one of the children, sprinkle holy water and make the sign of the cross, but the boy just smiled. A wide, wrong smile that showed too many teeth. After that, the pastor shut himself up in the rectory and wasn't seen again for a week. When he finally emerged, his hair had gone white as snow. He didn't preach anymore, just sat on the church steps with his Bible clutched shut in his hands, rocking back and forth like a man waiting for a bus that never came. Boyd wanted to keep order, but order doesn't mean much when people are too scared to even speak. Every knock on a door made folks jump, every flicker of a light bulb sent them scrambling. And always, the hum. Louder now. Sometimes it shook loose the nails in porch beams, sometimes it cracked windows. The whole town felt like it was living inside a giant machine, grinding its gears beneath their feet. Harper stopped showing up at his office. Folks said they saw him out by the cemetery one night, digging with his bare hands like he was looking for something buried. Others claimed he was sitting in the diner after midnight, smoking and muttering to himself about roots deeper than blood. Whatever the truth, he was losing it, same as everyone else. Then came the cattle incident. The McCready Ranch sat about 2 miles outside of town, right up against the wheat fields. They ran a few dozen head of cattle, scrawny things but enough to keep the family fed. One morning, Boyd got a call to come quick. When he arrived, the whole herd was lying in the pasture, stiff as statues. Not butchered, not torn apart, just wrong. Their bodies were twisted, legs bent backward, necks turned all the way around, eyes wide open and glassy. Not a drop of blood spilled, not a hoof print in the dirt. The youngest McCready boy said he saw lights in the field the night before, lights that moved like fireflies but too big, too slow. He swore one of them hovered over the fence line, and the cows started bellowing like they knew death was in the air. Boyd didn't write a report. He just told the McCreadys to bury the animals and not talk about it. But the smell lingered for weeks, the stench of rot carried on every breeze, and even the vultures wouldn't touch the bodies. The exodus began after that. Families who hadn't already left started cramming trucks with whatever they could carry. Some managed to make it out, though there were rumors about cars found abandoned on backroads, doors swinging open, radios hissing static. Others never even got that far. Boyd would find houses empty, beds still warm, food still steaming on dinner plates. No sign of struggle, just silence, heavier than ever. And the ones who stayed, well, they started changing. Not overnight, not all at once, but slow, creeping changes. Eyes dulling. Skin thinning, almost translucent. People stopped blinking as much, stopped eating as much. They'd just stand by their windows, staring out at the fields with that same vacant look the children wore. It was like the town was being hollowed out from the inside, turned into shells waiting to be filled with something else. Boyd tried to keep himself steady by sticking to routine. Coffee in the morning, patrols in the afternoon, whiskey at night. But every time he drove past the fields, he swore he saw faces swaying in the wheat. Not just shadows or tricks of the eye, but real faces. Jennings. Jimmy Lawson. Even his wife, dead 3 years, her eyes black pits that seemed to swallow the sun. He'd slam the accelerator, tear down the road till the vision disappeared, but it never left him. They were out there. All of them. Waiting. And some nights, when the hum was at its loudest, he thought he heard them calling to him in unison, a chorus of familiar voices begging him to step into the wheat. To let himself be taken. And Boyd, tired and broken, wondered how much longer he could resist. It was around this time the dreams began. Not just for Boyd, but for everyone left in Red Harvest. At first, they were vague, shadows moving across fields, whispers carried on the wind, glimpses of pale shapes standing outside bedroom windows. But soon they grew sharper, more real, until waking up felt like dragging yourself out of another world. Boyd dreamed of walking through the wheat under a black sky, stars pulsing like veins, the stalks parting around him as if guiding him deeper. In the dream, he always heard footsteps behind him, heavy and deliberate, but when he turned, there was nothing there, only the endless rustling of the wheat. Then one night the dream changed. He found himself standing in the Lawson's crater, that black pit where the house had burned away. Something moved below, something vast, shifting in the dark, and he realized the ground wasn't dirt at all but skin, stretched tight and trembling. He woke up screaming, drenched in sweat, shotgun clutched to his chest. Others had worse. Mrs. McCready was found wandering the highway barefoot, muttering about the roots in her veins. A mechanic's wife slit her wrists in the bathtub after waking from a dream where she swore her husband's face had been replaced with an eyeless mask of wheat stalks. Even the children weren't spared. One boy at school began drawing pictures of black holes surrounded by stick-figure people with their arms raised. Another girl stopped speaking entirely, except to whisper, "It's almost time," whenever someone tried to get her attention. Doc Harper said it was mass hysteria, stress-induced nightmares, but Boyd could see the truth in his eyes. Harper was dreaming too. The hum grew louder still, a constant now, like the steady thrum of a hive buried beneath the earth. It seeped into everything, into bones, into thoughts. Radios stopped working, televisions hissed nothing but static. Even clocks seemed to falter, second hands jerking back and forth as though time itself had grown unsure. Night stretched on forever. Boyd swore the sun rose later each day, dragging itself unwillingly over the horizon. And when it did, the light looked wrong, duller, weaker, as if something was leeching its strength. Then one evening, the Lawson boy returned. Not alive, at least, not the way he'd been. Mrs. Jenkins, the waitress, swore she saw him first. She was closing up her kitchen, washing dishes, when she glanced out the window and saw Jimmy Lawson standing at the edge of the wheat. His clothes were the same ones he'd worn the night he vanished, muddy sneakers, faded jeans, a red t-shirt with a hole in the collar. But his skin was pale as bone, and his eyes were black. Not the shiny kind of black like marbles or buttons, but flat and endless, like looking into a hole that never ended. Mrs. Jenkins screamed so hard she collapsed, clutching her chest. When Boyd arrived, she was incoherent, babbling about Jimmy waving at her, smiling like he wanted her to come join him. By the time Boyd looked, the boy was gone, swallowed by the wheat. Word spread fast. Some said it was a trick, a ghost, a punishment for not praying hard enough. Others said it was proof that the fields weren't just killing people, but keeping them, changing them. Boyd wanted to dismiss it, but that night as he sat on his porch, he saw something too. A figure, small and thin, walking slow along the fence line. A boy. Jimmy. Boyd raised his shotgun, hands trembling, but he didn't pull the trigger. Couldn't. Because in that moment, Jimmy opened his mouth and Boyd heard his daughter's voice. Clear as day. Calling his name. The sheriff dropped the gun. And that was when he finally understood what Harper meant about the land noticing them. It wasn't just watching. It was calling. Boyd tried to tell himself he was losing his mind. That's what a sane man does when the world starts twisting. He finds excuses. Stress, whiskey, exhaustion. But deep down he knew better. The land had him now. Red Harvest had always been his home, but now it felt like a trap sprung tight around his ribs. He carried his shotgun everywhere, even to the bathroom. The townsfolk noticed, but nobody teased him. They were too busy clutching their own weapons, their own talismans. Red Harvest had become a place of sleepless eyes and trembling hands, a town waiting for a verdict. And each night, the hum seemed to ask the same question. Are you ready yet? Doc Harper wasn't doing well either. Boyd found him one afternoon sitting on the curb outside his office, staring at the wheat with a cigarette burned down to the filter. His eyes were bloodshot, his hands shaking. It's older than the bones in the ground, Harper rasped, when Boyd sat down beside him. Older than us, older than everything we know. The Comanche called it the hunger. My grandfather used to tell me stories, and I thought he was just trying to scare me straight. But it's real, Boyd. We woke it up. He tossed the dead cigarette into the street, where it fizzled out in a small puddle. And it won't stop until it's full. Full of what? Boyd asked. His throat was dry even as he asked it. You know what? Harper muttered. Us. That night, a storm rolled through. Thunder without rain, lightning without clouds. The sky split in jagged flashes, lighting up the fields, and Boyd swore he saw the wheat ripple like a living thing, waves rolling outward as though something massive was moving just beneath the surface. The houses shook, windows rattled, but no rain fell, not a drop. The storm left the earth dry as bone, and the smell of rot was stronger than ever. By morning, half the town was gone. Not dead, just gone. Doors wide open, bedsheets tangled, meals half-eaten. Like they'd gotten up in the middle of the night and walked straight into the fields without looking back. And those who remained? They weren't right. Their eyes were glassy, their skin pale and thin, and they moved slower, like their joints didn't quite fit anymore. Boyd tried talking to them, asking where their families had gone, but they only smiled faintly and said things like, "The harvest is near." Or, "We'll all be together soon." By then Boyd stopped sleeping. He sat on his porch every night, shotgun across his knees, whiskey sweating in his hand, waiting for the shapes to return. And they always did. At first one or two, gliding through the rows like shadows unmoored from bodies. Then more, until the field was crawling with them, dozens of black-faced things swaying with the wheat. And every night they crept closer. Not by much, just a step or two. But Boyd saw it. He measured the distance with his eyes. They were coming for him, slow and patient, like hunters who already knew their prey had nowhere else to run. One night, they finally crossed the fence line. Boyd's heart hammered as he cocked his shotgun and aimed. His fingers squeezed the trigger, and the blast tore through the dark, lighting up the yard. For a split second he thought he'd hit one, saw its head snap back, body shuddering. But then the smoke cleared, and the thing was still standing. No blood. No wound. Just that bottomless black face staring straight at him. Boyd fired again. And again. The shotgun clicked empty. The shapes didn't flinch. Didn't move. They just stood there in the grass, silent, watching. Then, slowly, in perfect unison, they turned and slid back into the wheat. Boyd sat frozen till morning, shotgun useless in his lap, ears ringing with the echo of his own gunfire. And when the sun finally rose, weak and pale, he realized he'd crossed a line. He'd challenged them. They wouldn't wait much longer now. Backhand index pointing right. Should I keep going and dive straight into paragraph 7? Next 7. The moment Boyd whispered back, something shifted. He couldn't explain it, not then, not ever, but the air seemed to thicken, pressing against his skin like wet wool. The hum deepened, vibrating the floorboards of his house, rattling glasses in the cabinets, buzzing in his teeth until he thought they'd crack. Out in the yard, the figures stopped moving. They froze, all at once, heads tilting in the same unnatural angle, as though they'd been waiting for him to finally acknowledge them. Boyd's throat went dry. His shotgun felt like a toy in his hands. For years, he'd been the law in Red Harvest, the man people trusted to keep order. But staring at those black faces in the moonlight, he knew order didn't matter here. He wasn't a sheriff anymore. He was prey. The next morning, Harper came pounding on his door. His shirt was soaked through with sweat, his hands covered in dirt like he'd been digging all night. His eyes were wild, bloodshot. "It's close," he rasped. "Closer than ever. I saw it, but the roots. They're under everything. Streets, houses, even the church. It's already got us. We're just waiting for it to pull tight." He begged Boyd to help him burn the fields. "It's the only way," Harper insisted. "Fire cleanses. Fire kills." But Boyd remembered the Lawson house, the way the flames had sunk down instead of spreading. Fire didn't kill this thing, it fed it. He told Harper no, but the old man only laughed, a dry, broken laugh that sounded too much like sobbing. That night, Boyd dreamed again. Only it didn't feel like a dream anymore. He was standing in the fields, the wheat taller than his head, brushing against his arms like fingers. The hum was deafening, shaking the earth beneath his boots. And then the wheat parted, and something rose from the soil. Not a man. Not an animal. Something older, something vast. He couldn't see its shape clearly, it was too big, too wrong, but he saw its mouth. A gaping hole lined with teeth like broken glass, stretching wider and wider until it split the sky. From that mouth spilled voices, Jennings, Jimmy, his wife, every missing soul in Red Harvest, screaming and begging and laughing all at once. The sound drove him to his knees. He clamped his hands over his ears, but it didn't matter. The voices weren't outside, they were inside him. They were becoming him. He woke with blood on his sheets and dirt under his fingernails. His boots were by the door, caked with mud. He hadn't left the house. Not that he remembered. But the mud was real, dark and clinging, smelling faintly of rot. And worse, on the floor by the window were footprints. Small ones. A child's. They led from the window to his bed and then stopped. Boyd sat there for hours, shotgun in his lap, staring at those prints until the sun came up. The next day, he went to check on Harper. The doctor's office was empty, the door swinging open, papers scattered like a windstorm had passed through. The exam table was overturned, drawers pulled out, pills crushed underfoot. In the back room, Boyd found Harper's journal. The last entry, scrawled in shaky handwriting, read, "It doesn't want fire. It doesn't want blood. It wants surrender. That's the only way it ends. Not with a fight. With a bargain." Boyd closed the journal with shaking hands. A bargain. The word tasted bitter on his tongue, but part of him understood. Maybe that's why Harper was gone. Maybe he'd already made his bargain. That night, Boyd didn't patrol. Didn't sit on his porch with the shotgun. He just sat in his kitchen with a glass of whiskey, staring at the door, waiting. And right on time, as the clock ticked past midnight, the hum began again, louder, deeper, shaking the whole house. The lights flickered. The walls shuddered. And from outside, just beyond the door, came a knock. Not loud. Just 3 soft raps, patient and steady. Boyd's heart slammed against his ribs. His hands shook as he reached for the doorknob. He knew, deep down, that once he opened it, there would be no turning back. And still, he turned it. The door swung open, and Boyd braced himself for teeth and shadow, for the impossible shapes he'd seen in his dreams. But there was nothing monstrous waiting on the porch. Just a boy. Pale as moonlight. His eyes were wide and unblinking, pupils blown out till they looked bottomless. Boyd recognized him instantly. It was Jimmy Lawson. Only it wasn't. The boy had been missing for weeks, and the thing standing before him was too still, too hollow. Jimmy, or whatever wore his face, tilted his head and smiled, a thin, broken smile that stretched too wide. His lips moved, but the sound didn't come from his mouth. It came from everywhere. The hum had become words, rattling in Boyd's skull. "Sheriff, it's time." Boyd staggered back, shotgun rising on instinct. The boy didn't flinch. Didn't move at all. He just stood there on the porch like a doll, swaying slightly in the night breeze. Behind him, in the yard, the figures gathered. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds, their faces black voids, their bodies swaying in rhythm with the hum. Boyd's breath came short and fast. He wanted to slam the door, but his hand froze on the knob. The hum pinned him in place. His muscles locked. And then Jimmy spoke again, not with his mouth, but with Boyd's own memories. He heard his wife's voice, sweet and sharp, calling his name the way she used to when dinner was ready. He heard his mother, long dead, whispering lullabies. He heard Jennings, his old friend, laughing like nothing had ever happened. The voices layered, one on top of another, until Boyd didn't know what was real anymore. "Stop it," he croaked, pressing the shotgun barrel against his own temple just to drown out the noise. But the voices only grew sweeter, more familiar. They promised relief. They promised reunion. They promised an end to the loneliness. All he had to do was step forward, into the yard, into the waiting arms of the thing beneath Red Harvest. For a heartbeat he almost did. His foot lifted, his body leaned toward the porch steps. He saw the wheat swaying in the distance, not with the wind but with breath. The earth itself seemed to inhale, waiting for him. And then something inside him broke loose. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was survival. Maybe it was the memory of those children in the gym, their voices twisted into something not their own. Whatever it was, Boyd jerked his foot back and slammed the door shut with all his strength. The glass rattled in its frame. The hum roared in fury. The house shook like it would come apart, walls groaning, pictures tumbling to the floor. Boyd pressed his back against the door, shotgun clutched tight, heart hammering. Outside, Jimmy's voice, soft, patient, terrible, whispered through the wood, "You can't keep it out forever." The noise went on for hours. Boyd didn't move, didn't sleep. He sat there in the dark, listening to the thing scratch at the edges of his sanity. When dawn finally bled over the horizon, the hum faded, the figures gone like smoke. But Boyd knew it wasn't over. It would never be over. The town was already too far gone. That morning, he drove through Red Harvest one last time. Main Street was deserted, the windows blank, the fields stretching endless and hungry around him. He saw movement in the churchyard, figures digging graves that were far too wide, far too deep. He didn't stop. He just drove, past the school, past the diner, past the empty homes, until he reached the edge of town. The welcome sign was rusted, letters peeling. "Welcome to Red Harvest, God bless Texas." He pulled over, staring at it, knowing he might never cross this line again. Because the truth settled cold in his chest, Red Harvest wasn't just dying. It was already dead. And he was the last living soul still pretending otherwise. Boyd sat in his cruiser at the edge of town, engine idling, hands trembling on the wheel. He could drive away. No one would stop him. No one alive, at least. He could follow the highway till Red Harvest was nothing but a bad memory in his rearview mirror. But the hum was still with him, even here, a faint throb in the dashboard, a low vibration in his bones. He knew, with a certainty that chilled him deeper than anything else, that he could drive to Dallas, to Houston, hell, to the ends of the earth, and it would follow. Because Red Harvest wasn't just a place anymore. It was in him. He killed the engine and sat in silence, listening. The morning was too still. No birds. No insects. Just that faint, inescapable pulse. He thought of Harper, of Mrs. Ellison in her nightgown, of the children in the gymnasium with their mouths open in someone else's song. He thought of the boy on his porch, wearing Jimmy Lawson's face, whispering with his mother's voice. They weren't people anymore. They were vessels. The town wasn't dying, it was being harvested. The thought clawed at him until he felt raw inside. If he left, he would be just another runaway sheriff, another coward who couldn't save his own. If he stayed, maybe he'd go mad. Maybe he already was. But there had to be something he could do. Something more than waiting for the dark to swallow him. He reached into the glove compartment, pulled out the map of Red Harvest County. His eyes fell on the fields, endless blocks of wheat that stretched into nothingness. That was the heart of it. That was where the hum came from. That was where the figures walked at night. And deep down, Boyd knew, whatever had rooted itself in Red Harvest, whatever had stolen his town and hollowed its people, it lived out there, under the earth. He slammed the map shut, threw the cruiser into gear, and drove back toward town. The streets were empty, but the hum grew louder with every block, a steady rhythm pushing against his ribs. He followed it, block by block, until the houses thinned and the road turned to dirt. The wheat fields rose ahead of him, golden and swaying though there was no wind. The sight made his skin crawl. It wasn't wheat. Not anymore. It was a veil, a curtain hiding the thing beneath. Boyd parked at the edge of the field. The hum was deafening now, vibrating in his teeth, shaking the cruiser on its shocks. He stepped out, shotgun in hand, and pushed into the stalks. The wheat closed around him like a living wall, taller than he remembered, thick enough to blot out the sun. His breath came ragged. Sweat stung his eyes. Still he pushed forward, the stalks rasping against his uniform, whispering in voices that weren't his own. He walked until his legs shook, until his lungs burned. And then, suddenly, the wheat parted. He stumbled into a clearing, a perfect circle at the heart of the field. The earth here was black, scorched, cracked open like something had clawed its way out, or in. The hum was unbearable, pounding in his chest like another heartbeat. Boyd fell to his knees, clutching his ears, and saw the truth of it at last. Shapes writhed beneath the soil, pressing against the cracks, faces stretching upward in silent screams. Some he recognized. Jennings. Harper. His wife. Their features distorted, their mouths open in unending hunger. They weren't gone. They were here, part of it now. The thing in the earth had taken them, swallowed them whole, and was still feeding. The ground trembled. The cracks widened. Boyd raised his shotgun with shaking hands, though he knew a bullet wouldn't mean a damn thing against whatever this was. He screamed into the empty sky, a raw sound torn from the bottom of his soul. "What are you?" The earth answered with silence. And then, in every voice he had ever loved, it whispered back, "Home." The soil split wide beneath him. The hum roared. And Boyd realized, too late, that Red Harvest hadn't just been waiting for him. It had been calling him back all along. Sheriff Boyd woke to the taste of dirt in his mouth. His first thought was that he'd been buried alive. Blackness pressed around him, heavy and wet, clogging his throat. He clawed upward, fingernails splitting, lungs on fire, until suddenly his hand broke through and met air. He dragged himself out of the earth like something reborn, gasping, coughing up soil. When he finally staggered to his knees, the clearing was gone. The circle of scorched dirt had closed. Behind him, the wheat whispered in voices too faint to understand. Above, the sky was a flat, sickly gray, as if the sun had been smothered. Boyd sat there shaking, shotgun gone, badge cracked down the middle, unsure if minutes or hours had passed since the ground had swallowed him. His skin prickled. His veins hummed with the same low vibration he'd chased all night. Only now it wasn't outside him, it was in him. The realization made his stomach churn. He wasn't just a man anymore. The field had marked him. Maybe claimed him. He stumbled to his feet, each step heavy, like he was carrying something extra inside his bones. The wheat parted easily this time, opening a path for him as if it wanted him to leave. The stalks swayed gently, brushing against his arms in something like affection. He pushed through until he reached the dirt road. His cruiser was gone. No tracks in the dust, no sign it had ever been there. Just the endless horizon and the little town of Red Harvest crouched in the distance like a waiting predator. The streets were alive when he returned. Not alive the way they should have been, with children's bikes clattering, screen doors slamming, radios drifting from porches. Alive in the way a corpse twitches when the wires are crossed. Figures walked back and forth, aimless, blank-eyed, their lips moving in silent rhythm. They turned their heads as he passed, one by one, in perfect unison, watching him. Their eyes glowed faintly, a dull amber light like coals under ash. Boyd forced himself not to run. Running would make him pray. He reached Main Street and froze. In the middle of the road stood Harper. Or something wearing Harper's skin. The deputy's face was pale, stretched thin, eyes burning with that same sick light. But his mouth smiled, wide and easy, the way it used to on Sunday mornings when he bought donuts for the station. "Sheriff," he said, voice calm, steady. "We've been waiting." The words hit Boyd like a blow. He wanted to shout, to demand answers, but his throat locked up. All he could do was stare as Harper gestured to the storefronts. People, neighbors, friends, faces he'd sworn to protect, stepped out one by one. Mrs. Ellison. The Lawson boy. The entire second-grade class from the gymnasium. Their mouths opened, and the hum poured out, louder than ever, vibrating the glass in the windows, rattling the bones in Boyd's chest. Harper stepped closer. His smile never wavered. "You went into the field. You saw. You understand now." Boyd shook his head violently, backing away. "No. You're dead. All of you are dead." But Harper just tilted his head, like a dog hearing a whistle. "Dead?" he repeated softly, almost amused. "Sheriff, we're more alive than you can imagine. We're part of it now. And soon so will you." The crowd pressed closer, their voices rising, the hum turning into a terrible harmony. Boyd's knees buckled. The vibration inside him answered back, syncing with theirs. He clamped his hands over his ears, but it was inside him now, growing, spreading, hungry. His last thought before the darkness swept over him was that maybe Harper was right. Maybe he hadn't escaped the field at all. Maybe he'd never left. When Boyd opened his eyes again, he was lying on the floor of the old Red Harvest jailhouse. For a dizzy moment, he thought he'd dreamed everything, the wheat, the field, the boy with the empty eyes. But then the hum stirred inside him, soft as a cat's purr, and the truth settled like lead in his gut. He wasn't dreaming. He was changing. The cell door stood open, but he didn't remember walking here. His boots were caked with soil, dark and wet, like he'd been knee-deep in the earth again. He pulled himself upright, staring at the desk where he used to drink bad coffee and fill out endless reports on nothing crimes. But the station wasn't empty. Harper was there, sitting in Boyd's chair like he owned it, boots up on the desk. His uniform was clean, pressed, no sign of the grave or whatever hell he'd crawled out of. His eyes, though, that dull amber glow burned steady, patient. "Morning, Sheriff," Harper said, casual as if it were any other day. "Coffee's cold, but I reckon you don't need it anymore." Boyd's throat tightened. "What the hell are you?" Harper chuckled, leaning back. "Same thing you are. Not all the way yet, but close. You've got it in you now, crawling under your skin. You feel it, don't you? The pull? The weight? That's the field talking. It don't let go once it's touched you." Boyd staggered back against the wall, shaking his head. "No. I'm still me. I'm not like you." But Harper only smiled wider, almost pitying. "That's what they all say at first. I said it too. But Red Harvest ain't a town anymore, Sheriff. It's a mouth. It's been feeding for longer than you've been alive. And now you're part of the meal. Or maybe," his smile stretched unnaturally wide, Maybe you're the next course. The words chilled Boyd worse than the night wind. His hands twitched for a weapon, but his shotgun was gone. Only his badge lay on the desk, cracked down the middle. He snatched it up without thinking, gripping the jagged metal like it might still mean something. Harper's eyes flicked to it, and his grin faltered for the first time. "You don't understand," Harper said, his voice low, sharp. "That badge don't belong to you anymore. You wear it, the field sees it as defiance. And it don't like defiance." A sound stirred in the walls, low and grinding, like wood splitting under weight. The hum swelled in Boyd's skull, answering Harper's words, shaking his teeth. He pressed the badge to his chest anyway, panting. "I'm the law here, and I won't let you take this town." Harper rose slowly, boots thudding against the floor. "Sheriff, open your eyes. The town's already gone. What's left ain't people, it's vessels. You think you can fight it? Fine. But you'll be fighting yourself too. Because it's already inside you." Boyd's vision blurred. His reflection in the barred window shimmered, split. For a second, he didn't see himself at all. He saw a figure with hollow eyes, mouth stretched wide, amber fire glowing in its chest. He stumbled back, clutching the wall, bile rising in his throat. Harper watched him with quiet satisfaction. "You'll come around," he said softly. "They always do. It's easier when you stop fighting." Boyd forced his eyes shut, shaking his head until stars sparked behind his lids. "No," he whispered. "Not me. Not yet." When he opened them again, Harper was gone. The station was empty, silent, but the badge in Boyd's fist pulsed faintly, like a beating heart. And somewhere beyond the walls, the hum rose again, low, endless, patient, waiting for him to choose. Boyd staggered out of the jailhouse into the thick Texas heat, but something about the air felt wrong. It wasn't just heavy, it was alive. Each breath scraped his throat, like he was swallowing the whisper of wheat stalks. The streets of Red Harvest were deserted now, though he could feel eyes on him. Curtains twitched when he passed, doors creaked as if they were breathing. He gripped the cracked badge tight in his palm, the edges cutting into his skin, reminding him he was still flesh, still blood, still human. For now. He tried to convince himself there was a way out. Get in his truck. Leave the whole damn town behind. But even as the thought crossed his mind, the hum inside him answered with a sharp stab of pain, like it knew he was planning to run. His knees buckled. He pressed his hand against the hood of his cruiser, except the cruiser wasn't there. It shimmered in the heat haze, half seen, half not, a ghost of steel and chrome that disappeared when he blinked. The field didn't just mark him. It was rewriting his world piece by piece, replacing reality with its own. A dog's bark snapped the silence. Boyd turned sharply, heart-hammering. At the corner by the old gas station stood Daisy, Mr. Hartley's golden retriever. Only it wasn't Daisy anymore. Her fur bristled, eyes glowing with that same ember light, mouth slack and whispering the hum instead of barking. She padded forward slowly, movements stiff and jerky, like a marionette pulled by unseen strings. Boyd raised a trembling hand. "Stay back, girl." The dog tilted its head, lips peeling back in what might have been a snarl or a smile. Then, in a voice not her own, it whispered, "Sheriff." The word scraped raw across Boyd's nerves. His stomach turned cold. He stumbled backward, tripping over the curb, landing hard on the pavement. When he blinked, Daisy was gone. Just heat rippling off the empty street. Boyd forced himself up, chest heaving. He had to think. He had to move. The badge in his palm throbbed, urging him toward the outskirts, toward the fields. He resisted, turning instead toward the church at the end of Main Street. If anything in this cursed place still held ground against whatever force had claimed it, maybe it was there. The church doors groaned as he shoved them open. Inside, the air was thick with dust, the pews empty. But the altar candles flickered, though no one had lit them in weeks. He stepped cautiously down the aisle, boots echoing against the warped floorboards. The hum followed him inside, softer now, like it respected the place, or mocked it. At the altar, Boyd dropped the cracked badge onto the wood. For a moment, it seemed to pulse brighter, as if rejecting the sanctity of the space. He leaned heavily against the pulpit, whispering to the silence, God, if you're out there, I need help. I can't fight this thing alone. The only answer was the creak of wood settling. Then, faintly, a child's laugh echoed from the choir loft above. Boyd's blood turned to ice. He raised his head slowly. A figure stood in the shadows of the loft, small, slight, unmoving. The boy from the field. Why me? Boyd rasped, voice shaking. Why this town? The boy's mouth moved, though the sound that came out was not a child's. It was the hum, low and endless, filling every inch of the church until the stained glass windows rattled. Boyd clamped his hands over his ears, but the sound wasn't in the air anymore. It was inside him, vibrating through his bones. He collapsed to his knees, tears burning his eyes. The badge on the altar glowed red-hot, searing into the wood, smoke curling upward. Boyd knew then, with a certainty that hollowed him out, there was no saving Red Harvest. The town was already gone. The only question left was whether he'd burn with it, or stand against it, even if it killed him. Boyd stumbled out of the church as if the floor itself had spat him out. His ears rang, blood dripping from his nose, and the badge in his pocket burned like an ember. The world outside wasn't the same Red Harvest he'd known. The houses seemed taller, warped, leaning inward like crooked teeth. Windows were no longer glass but dark mirrors, reflecting not him but something behind him. Shapes writhing, stretching, reaching. The hum didn't come from the fields anymore. It came from everywhere. In the air. In the ground. In the marrow of his bones. He staggered toward his truck, but the street twisted, bending into a path that shouldn't exist. Asphalt melted into dirt, dirt into rows of wheat that swayed despite the still air. The field had followed him into town, or maybe the town had fallen into the field. Boyd couldn't tell anymore. All he knew was that the rows stretched endlessly, splitting and merging like veins under sickly skin. Sheriff. The voice floated on the wind, familiar, gentle. His wife. For a heartbeat, hope stabbed through his chest. He spun, eyes searching. And there she was, standing in the field's edge, hair falling across her shoulders, dress swaying as if in some unseen breeze. She smiled, the same way she used to when he came home late from patrol, tired and hungry. Linda? Boyd whispered, throat raw. Her smile widened, but her eyes were wrong. Too black, too deep, like looking into wells that had no bottom. She raised her hand, palm open. Come with me. It doesn't hurt if you don't fight. Every nerve in his body screamed to run to her. To hold her. To believe she'd somehow returned. But deep down he knew, this was not Linda. This was the field wearing her skin, puppeteering his grief. His hand hovered over his shotgun. His heart shattered as he pulled it free and leveled it at her. I buried you, he said hoarsely. Whatever you are, you don't get to wear her face. Her smile didn't falter. In fact, it spread until it split too wide, tearing the corners of her mouth, stretching skin until it cracked. Her voice layered with others. Jennings, the boy from the field, Harper, dozens more, all speaking at once. We are waiting. We are one. Boyd fired. The blast tore through her, wheat scattering like ash. The figure dissolved into the rows, her laugh echoing long after she vanished. Boyd fell to his knees, choking back sobs, shotgun slipping from his hands. He had killed her once. Now he'd killed her again. And still the field had her. The earth trembled under him, subtle at first, then stronger, like something shifting far below. The rows of wheat bent inward, all of them leaning toward him, as if the whole field was breathing his name. The hum spiked, rattling his teeth, making his vision blur. He pressed his palms to the ground to steady himself, and felt a heartbeat pulsing beneath the soil. Slow, ancient, patient. It wasn't just a presence. It was alive. Boyd staggered back to his feet, rage flooding in to fill the hollow where grief had lived. Maybe he couldn't save Red Harvest. Maybe he couldn't save himself. But he could damn well hurt whatever this thing was. He picked up his shotgun, racked the last shell, and started walking straight into the rows. Each step sank heavier, as though the soil wanted to hold him, pull him under. The stalks whispered against his arms, his face, his neck. Words crawled into his ears, promises of peace, of reunion, of surrender. He ignored them, jaw clenched, eyes locked on the darkness ahead. If the field wanted him, it could have him, but not on its terms. "I'm coming for you," Boyd growled. "And I'm taking this whole rotten field down with me." Somewhere deep in the rows, something laughed. The rows closed around Boyd like the ribs of some titanic beast. Each stalk of wheat towered higher than before, their golden heads turned black and brittle, whispering in tongues older than the town, older than Texas itself. The air thickened, damp and hot, carrying a stench of rot that clung to his throat. Every step forward felt like sinking deeper into another world, a place where laws of nature had been rewritten, where time moved in circles instead of lines. He tried not to think about how long he had been walking. Minutes, hours, days, he couldn't tell anymore. The hum had grown louder, no longer a vibration but a song, deep and guttural, sung by 1,000 unseen throats. It crawled along his spine, urging him to let go, to stop fighting. The shotgun in his hands felt heavier, almost useless, like a child's toy brought into a war zone. Still, he clutched it because it was the last piece of the real world he had left. Then the rows ended. He stumbled into a clearing, wider than any he had seen before, ringed by stalks that swayed though there was no wind. The soil in the center bulged upward, pulsing, alive. He saw faces in it, hundreds of them, stretching and shifting beneath the surface. Jennings, Harper, Linda, all staring, all mouthing the same words without sound. Boyd's stomach twisted, bile rising in his throat. It wasn't just a field. It was a graveyard. No, worse, it was a womb, birthing something that fed on them. The soil split with a wet crack, and something began to rise. Not a person. Not an animal. Something that remembered being human once, and wore the memory like a mask. Its body was a lattice of roots and sinew, its face a collage of all the people Boyd had ever known. Eyes opened across its chest, its arms, its throat. And every one of them looked at him. "Sheriff," it said in 1,000 voices layered together. "Linda's among them. You belong here." Boyd raised the shotgun, his arms shaking, but his aim steady. "The hell I do." The thing laughed. The clearing shook. The wheat bowed in reverence. "You carry us already. You carry the seed. Killing us means killing yourself." Boyd felt it then, sharp and undeniable. The rhythm inside his chest wasn't his heartbeat anymore. It was theirs. The hum wasn't just around him. It was inside him, twining through his veins, waiting to bloom. For a flicker of a moment, he almost gave in. Almost let the shotgun drop. Almost stepped forward into the soil's embrace. But then he remembered Linda's laugh, not the twisted echo in the rows, but the real one, warm and clumsy, the way it bubbled out when he spilled coffee on himself at breakfast. He remembered the Lawson boy throwing rocks at stop signs. Harper telling crude jokes after midnight patrols. The town as it was before the field swallowed it whole. He squeezed the trigger. The blast tore into the thing's chest. It screamed, voices splintering, wheat thrashing violently around them. Boyd racked the final shell and fired again. The creature reeled, but it didn't fall. Instead, roots lashed out from the soil, wrapping around his legs, his arms, pulling him down. He fought, cursed, clawed, but the earth opened beneath him, swallowing him whole. As the dirt closed over his head, the last thing he saw was the field blooming, faces stretching in the wheat, eyes opening, mouths humming in triumph. And the last thing he heard was his own voice joining theirs. Morning came to Red Harvest, though it was not a morning anyone living could bear to see. The sun rose, yes, but it was veiled in a haze that turned the light copper red, like blood diluted in water. The wheat fields glistened wet, as if dew clung to them, but Boyd would have sworn, if he'd still been himself, that it was not dew at all. The stalks looked stronger now, fuller, and when the wind pushed through them, they bent and swayed as though bowing to something buried deep below. The sheriff's truck sat abandoned near the church, driver's door hanging open, engine cold. His shotgun lay discarded in the dirt by the road, the barrel twisted and blackened like it had been struck by lightning. Folks driving through the county, strangers who didn't know better than to stop, said the town seemed empty, as though everyone had up and vanished. The houses were still there, the buildings, the gas station, the diner. But the windows were all dark, and the silence was so heavy that even their radios cut out when they passed the city limits. Now and then, though, travelers swore they heard voices. Children laughing in the alleys. A woman calling for her husband. A sheriff's voice on the wind, warning them to turn around before it was too late. Nobody ever listened, not at first. The few who lingered longer than they should have, who thought the town was just another backwater with strange folks, never made it out. Their cars stayed parked along Main Street until weeds crawled over the tires. The wheat fields grew taller with each passing season. They stretched farther too, inching past the fence posts and dirt roads, swallowing barns, gas pumps, even the schoolyard. Old maps stopped making sense. What was once a 10-minute drive through farmland became an endless trek, rows upon rows, like a maze that rebuilt itself every time someone tried to cut through. The hum, people said, could sometimes be heard all the way from Amarillo on clear nights, carried by the wind. A low, steady vibration, not quite music, not quite thunder. Something that crawled into your ears and stayed there. And deep in the fields, if you dared to walk far enough, you could see the faces. Not whole, not clear, but impressions in the stalks. A sheriff's hat woven in husks. A woman's smile blooming in petals. A child's handprint pressed into soil where no child had walked. The harvest had taken them, made them part of itself, and it was hungry for more. Always hungry. The story of Red Harvest faded from newspapers, replaced by fresher tragedies and bigger headlines. But truckers whispered about it at late-night diners. Farmers along the edge of the county swore their crops sometimes bent toward that direction, like something pulling them. And hunters who strayed too far claimed they saw the sheriff himself, standing among the wheat, his badge gleaming faintly in the half-light, eyes black as pitch. If you called to him, he would turn, smile the way a man smiles when he finally accepts his fate, and then he would beckon you closer. No one who stepped into the rows after that ever came back. In the end, Red Harvest wasn't a ghost town. Ghosts meant something had ended. No, Red Harvest was still alive, if you could call it that. The field kept growing. The voices kept singing. And beneath the soil, the heartbeat kept pulsing, slow and steady, waiting for the next traveler foolish enough to stop and wonder what had happened here. Because the truth is, towns don't die. They change. They remember. They keep what belongs to them. And Red Harvest remembers everyone.